Hi, my name is Rob Ryder, speaking out of West Cornwall, and I'm joined again this evening with Patrick Quanton in Andalusia. Hi again, Patrick.
Hello, good evening.
Yeah, so tonight we're just really going to continue from where we left off. So we had the first conversation regarding seed of a universe and the influences that make that seed burst open and develop. And then the second conversation was basically what I put on the link. The description and the title was how the universe evolves from physics to chemistry and now biology. And you talked about a lot of it being pressure on the things, should we say? We say things. The pressure on the thing brings about a need to evolve itself to be able to absorb more pressure.
Yeah.
And you could say the pressure is energy, the energy is information, and it allows the thing to absorb more information. And I won't get bogged down on this word tonight, but I'm sure we'll come across it later on in our conversations. But you could actually say that it allows the thing to become more conscious because it's actually capable of absorbing more information because of its need to do that because of the pressures. So I kind of leave that there. I don't want to get stuck on some words that we're not going to come to yet. So I'd like to go, you explained biological life and the evolution from plants to animals, certain types of animals and not to humans. And it was all to do with the pressure and the need to evolve to absorb that pressure. And so I'd like to go back to the first cellular life. But you've kind of explained that process. So I want to go specifically to human cell life and human conception. So I'll be quite a long question, but obviously you'll give me quite a long answer. So you've got male energy in the form of a sperm, female energy in the form of an egg, and they come together. And the whole world kind of sees this as a physical thing. But I'm going to presume here you're going to talk about the energetic coming together, which is what we're interested. And the influences on that. So you've got the influences of the male, influences of the female, influences of the environment, because a new human being is a new creation. You mentioned at the very first conversation, the universal seed was in an energetic environment, and all influence will influence that seed in large ways or smaller ways. We could have earthly energies, solar system energies, cosmic energies. I'm going to presume the major energies will be off the sperm and the egg, but you know, it's a whole holistic look at that moment of conception and what energies are coming together, and then the significance and influence of the genetic structure. So is that quite a good framework to work off?
Yeah, I think we can go a long way along those lines. Maybe we ought to, well, first of all, I want to say that what we're going to talk about is scientific knowledge, right? It is known to scientific researchers, the information that we're going to give out. Obviously, what we're going to try and do is put it into simple terms, but it's scientific knowledge. And maybe to start with, because otherwise we're gonna confuse the whole matter. What is the role of the genetic information inside a cell, right? What does the genetic coding, the DNA of a cell, do to the cell? Because what I'm saying is it's scientific knowledge, right? I reckon it's over 100 years, 150 years maybe, that science already knows this. Out of plant research, plant cell research, we know that if you remove the nucleus of the cell, so you take out all the genetic information, all the chromosomes, all the genetic coding out of a cell by taking the complete nucleus out of a cell, then that cell continues to live as normal. Now, that doesn't make sense in what we are told the genetic information is for, because we are told that the genes are there to make the proteins and amino acids and everything else on a minute-to-minute basis. So in other words, you know, it's the seed of life, as the medical profession calls it and wants us to believe. But we already know that that's not true. The cell without a nucleus continues to live, continues to do everything that it did before. What researchers have found is that a cell without a nucleus cannot learn any new tricks. So in other words, it does what it normally do. It continues to live as it normally lives, but it can't respond to extreme things, right? So, but that in itself proves that genetic information in a cell is not needed for that cell to function. That's important to realize, right? Okay. Then, yes, female genetic information inside a female cell, and the male genetic information inside the male sperm, inside, it's not a cell, but okay, it's contained within a membrane, and it's within a certain functional unit. Those two come together, and then the first cell is formed. You have to realize that before the male information enters the female cell, that the female cell is not a cell. It's not a cell in a sense that it doesn't have any cellular structure. It doesn't have any cellular structure. It doesn't function. What is it? It's a combination of fats, proteins, amino acids. It's a feeding ground. And in a very small part of, let's say, the center, the nucleus of that cell, a very small part, very compressed, is the genetic female information. But that genetic female information is not doing anything. It's not keeping a cell alive. It's not feeding, it's not excreting things, it's not producing things, it's not doing anything because it hasn't got any organelles, organs to do it. So it's not a cell. So it's easy to say, got the male information, female information, the male information enters the sphere of the female information, and now my first cell is complete. No. Your first cell still needs to be formed. And only then can you start thinking about creating an organism. This is a step that the medical profession just swiftly steps over it. It doesn't want to talk about it. It doesn't want to say anything. Is there anything scientifically known about this step? Oh, yes, there is. Yes, there is. What we do know is that when the male information, let's just call it that, enters the cell, then there is a shift in electrical potential that happens within that female sphere. There is a shift of electrical potential. Not only have they measured it, they filmed it. And it's possible to film it because when that happens, there is like a lightning strike that goes on, that is generated within the cell, and you can visualize it. So it's a streak of lightning, streak of light that goes through the cell. And what happens then, or what are the consequences of that? Then everything changes. That female sphere, the membrane changes. Just to put it simply, it hardens up. So it closes itself off from the outside environment. Or we could say nothing else can enter it. Nothing can go out, nothing can go in anymore. Inside, so all these fats and all these nutrients, the nutrients that are in there, they start organizing themselves because of the new electromagnetic potential. And now think back of what I said about, when the pressure comes on a energetic field, then an energetic field with material, with matter in it, then that matter gets compressed. And that means that the molecules are finding a position so that they take up less space, and they find a position in which they can tolerate or absorb that extra pressure. So because of the extra potential, it starts to shift these elements. So some fats in certain parts of that female field are arranging themselves in a particular way, and in another part of that field, it arranges itself in a different way. The same molecules, the same fats and sugars and amino acids and so on. And so they start forming the organelles or the organs of the cell itself. That's the second major change that you see within that female field. And the third one is that you see that the male genetic information and the female genetic information, that they start joining up in a similar fashion as I was just describing for any molecules within that field. So they snug together in a way that they are complements of each other. So they find each other and they can get close together, and they attach one part to another part. And that gives us the double helix chromosomes that we talk about when we're talking about the DNA inside the nucleus of a cell. So all the organelles and also the structure of the nucleus itself comes about because of an electrical impulse into a field of matter. The matter is the molecules that are in there. Does science know about this? I've already said, yes, we do know this is how it happens. And here is another interesting little bit of knowledge. The medical profession and related professions, they clone organisms. Yeah? Cloning. How does that happen? Well, it's simple. You take a live cell from an organism and you grow a similar or the same organism from that, with all the characteristics that are in there. Yep. But here is my question. When we leave a cell alone, the only thing that cell does is replicate itself. right? So if I take a muscle cell, it will create other muscle cells. If I take a liver cell, it will create other liver cells, nothing else. So how can one cell from an organism, anywhere in my body, in a manner of speaking, how can that one cell then all of a sudden create all the different cells that are needed inside an organism? Whether it's a big one, a complex one, or a small one, it doesn't matter. How does it do that? Do they know? Yes, of course they know, because they are cloning living animals. And here is the interesting bit. How do you make that cell that under normal circumstances would only replicate itself? How do you make that cell into a complete organism? Well, they start the process by putting an electrical charge onto the cell. So what are they doing? They change the potential, the electromagnetic potential inside the cell, and now these things are starting to move about, and they start the recreative process of the whole organism, of all the information that is inside the cell. That should be interesting. Now, so what happens then? How does this cell evolve? So with this electrical impulse, whether it's a already made cell, if you like, and you start cloning, or whether you start from that first cell after the joining together of the male and the female information, now you have your first cell. So what happens next? What happens next is that in 3 steps, the cell will evolve and create 3 different layers of cells. Those have different information, and they will create, from those 3 lines, it will create different organs, different type of cells. So, for instance, your nerve cell will come from one particular line, and your muscle cell will come from a different line. So first 3 lines, different lines, and then they diverse again. All because of the differential potentials that are in those cells. So different responses to different impulses. That's the whole thing. That's how it begins. So let's then go back. What is the function of the DNA, of the genetic information inside the nucleus of the cell? Indeed, it does what the medical profession tells you that it does. It gives the information to the organelles in the cell, to the organs, to create the different things that are needed. So it creates proteins, amino acids, and so on. The cell creates those, specifically under instructions from the DNA. Now, the genetic coding is basically a 3-letter word, if you like. The complete genetic information is coded in blocks of 3. And what happens then is that from this whole string of words, 3-letter words, if you like, the nucleus of the cell makes, under impulses, under energetic pressure, impulses, creates, with these words, creates sentences. And a sentence like that, in other words, a follow-up of several different genetic codes with a beginning of a sentence and an end word, or a full stop, if you like. Yeah. That is an instruction that then is transported to a particular organelle inside the cytoplasm of the cell, and they just make whatever happen, whatever they need to make. And then various sentences, which lead to various building blocks, are then put together to form a particular structure inside that cell and the cells themselves all together. So what happens in the embryology in the very early stages of your pregnancy? Well, the first thing that happens is that we need to create, if we're talking about human fertilization, we need to create a human form before we can start to develop the human that is there. First, the human form. Now, we know that in the first 10 to 12 weeks of pregnancy, that there are various stages that the embryo moves through. All humans, yeah, irrespective of race or color, they all move through the same phases, and the phases have been identified as the same phases that the whole of creation has gone through. So there is a bean phase, plants, yeah. Then there is the reptile phase. There is the bird phase. There is the mammal phase. So gradually, in those first 10, 12 weeks of the pregnancy, the human form is being created, and it's being created in the same way as it was created in creation, in the whole of the universe. What's, in a physical sense, what is guiding and steering this whole process? It's the genetic information inside the cell. It's a human cell, so it will lead to a human form, right? If it was the cell of a dog, it will lead to a dog. That cell could never make a human because it doesn't have that last bit of information. So we create the human form along the pathway of the creation itself. How is it done? The information is in the DNA to form the human form, to get there, to make it that way. The whole expression, bit by bit, step by step, comes from that DNA. Once it's activated, that's how it goes. So we create that human form, and the information for that comes from the DNA, from the genetic code. And it turns out that about 94% of the DNA information is being expressed in that first 10 to 12 weeks. In other words, it is needed to make the human form, basic human form. That is the information that is in the DNA. Okay, 94%. So that would, if that is true, what I'm saying now, then that would also explain why if you have a living cell and you take out the nucleus, that cell wouldn't die because it doesn't need 94% or even more, we don't know, of the information that is in the nucleus. It doesn't need it anymore. It's already been formed. It already knows what to do. It already breathes. The heart is already beating, in a manner of speaking. So that fits together. That information nicely fits together. So the DNA is a storage, a way of holding on, storing the information, and the information that it stores apparently has to do with the whole of the creation. Basic steps, but it's in there. And it follows the same pattern. In other words, the energy unfolds, or the energy within the field unfolds in the same way, step by step, as the whole of creation has been unfolding. So it's a ingrained process. Once you nudge it and it starts off, and you nudge it by creating the right potential in the cell so that you get that lightning strike, then it starts to create, with the information that is there, it starts to create that living item, that living organism. That is what we need, basically need our DNA for. It stores information. Great. With that information, we can replicate what we had before, right? So the human race continues because the information that it needs, that it requires, is passed on via the DNA information, genetic information of the male and the female put together, and we create a new one, and it continues. So it's a storing of information. Great. But that also means that the information that it stores has to be updated regularly, because otherwise you would have not evolution. You would just create the same thing over and over again, and it would always be the same. In other words, it would never learn anything. It would never evolve into anything else than it was. So the DNA also takes up information and puts it into matter, i.e. The genetic coding. That is important to know, because that means that the DNA also has a new bit, an end bit, the ends of the DNA, of the genetic coding. They're updated. They're not updated with every little thing that we come across. In other words, it's not because you're angry about something that will show up in the genes, in your genetic information. But if you're living if your whole life is spent in an extremely dangerous situation, that what you learn throughout your life and how you respond to that, you will pass that on to the next generation. First of all, you pass that on directly through your behavior. In other words, your children will see how you respond and will copy that or do the opposite, but they're very much influenced by what you do and how you act and how you react. But if you do that for 2 or 3 generations, then it becomes reality. Reality as in it's a prolonged effect. So you could say that the pressure on that field is continuing throughout the generations, and then it materializes. So then the energetic information of those people, of that group, will go into matter. And the matter is a code, a simple code that changes their behavior and ultimately will change the physical structure. Yeah, if you live in a way that you do not need a tail, then over generations, the physical part of that, your tail, will not develop anymore. If you go back and see how that organism is then being created in embryonic stages, then you see the tail appearing and then disappearing again by the time that organism is completely formed. So the DNA is definitely also a receiver of impulses, energetic information that it translates into physical coding. Yeah, nucleotides that fit into the DNA coding. You could say it has created a new word to add to the dictionary. And that is basically what the DNA stands for and what it is supposed to do. Yeah, the need for the DNA is almost entirely to express what the cell or that energetic field already knows, already has experienced, and to express that in a material form. That is what it's for. And at the same time, it's a learning tool. It's if the energetic information is continual, then that means that the physical matter will adapt to it. And that's it.
Right, so that's quite a little bit to break down. So I want to, for tonight, stick on this subject matter of conception and mainly that first cell and the genetic coding. Now, I've got a few observations here, and you just explain them. If you don't think it's too relevant, mention that, that's fine. Or if you just think it needs a little bit of an explanation, that's fine. So we'll just go through a few things and see what you've got to say. The first one is an interesting observation that you mentioned, actually, what I was going to mention in the question. When I've seen these videos of the sperm meeting the egg in laboratories, and you do see that spark, is it significant that that spark is a new creation and the universe was kind of sparked into life, as it were? I'm sure I've heard you say before that the first friction out of that friction of the seed of the environment was an electrical charge. Is there a connection there with the human cell being a new creator?
Yeah, I think it's exactly the same way that things are being created. You change the potential within an energy field, and when that potential changes, then the energy and the frequencies and so on, they change, and the balance between the various energies changes. So the creation of the universe must have started with the seed just lying there, if you like, a very small but very compacted energetic field that then gets put into a different potential, and that creates an electrical charge within that field, which then disturbs, if you like, opens up the and moves, starts the movement. The potential between two energies or energetic fields is what creates the movement. Yeah, your ions will move from one positive to a negative side. That movement is created by the potential. So you create movement within that almost stagnant energetic field that then starts to create whatever is in that seed. And for the universe, that is what we are seeing and what we are experiencing. That is the whole evolution. That is everything within creation. Yes.
Yes, so that kind of goes with what you're saying about this so-called junk DNA. Is what you're really saying is every single human being on the planet and that existed has gone through the whole evolutionary process of the whole universe. And you could possibly say that that little electrical charge in the cell was a big bang. Yeah. And then this whole development stage for 12 weeks was the expression of the whole universe. And that absolutely, if that is true, by the way, that absolutely confirms that we're what a lot of these kind of activists see nowadays is we are an extension of nature and part of nature. We're not a separate. A lot of, even though it's quite obvious, a lot of these activists see human beings as a separate part of the planet, of nature, that's causing damage. When if we're actually all gone through the whole universal evolutionary process to be a human being, then all we are is an extension of this universal process and an extension of this planet, really.
Yeah, you can't escape being part of the creation when you're created by the creation. Yeah, so and thinking that we are something totally separate is ludicrous if you look at how close the two layers come together. The highest development in the previous layer and the beginning of the next layer, they're very closely related. I mentioned before that, you know, the difference between plant life and animal life initially is very, very small. To say that something is a plant and something is an animal, there are distinct differences that will define the organism as one or the other. But when you look at it from a bit of a distance, then they are looking pretty much alike. But one, in this example, the plant, can't develop any further, and the animal will start its development. So there's still a lot of potential within that seed. And so it's that is how things relate to one another. One comes from the previous development. That's where a new development starts. So when you talk about human beings, all of the sudden, if you like, appearing on the face of the earth, then that is part of whatever happened before the humans arrived here. And you have to go through all those stages if you want to find humans, if you like, anywhere else. So it's no good going to Mars and walking around there looking for other human beings, because you won't find any. Why not? Because there are no animals up there. Yeah, you have bacteria, but bacteria come before the plants. So on Mars, there's no plants, there's no animals, so you can't find any humans there either. It's simple. One after the other. Nothing separate, as you indicated. Nothing separate. You know, it's all part of the same old thing.
So there's another couple of things that come out like of that, because like I say, we may as well stay on this one subject tonight because it's quite big. So as opposed to what a lot of people in the spiritual world are saying, we need to tap in to this DNA that we're not using to evolve. You hear quite a few people in the spiritual world that saying it isn't junk DNA, it's DNA that we've been locked out of, shall we say. Now, if evolution happens in the energetic field and not in the physical field, then we don't need to tap into a physical field, should we say, for want of a better word, that's already there to evolve.
No.
So I can't prove what you're saying is right, but it actually makes more sense to me because I'm trying to see things as an energetic process. So rather than these spiritual people saying, I need to focus my mind and tap into that DNA potential, what they actually need to do is focus the mind on their environment and the life, see where they want to go, and eventually, if need be to survive and to evolve and to grow, that DNA code will just manifest from the energetic field.
Yeah, to make it very simple for our listeners, right? The changes in the energy field comes first. The materialization, the manifestation of matter out of that energy field comes later. You cannot make any progress in evolutionary terms by using or looking into the matter. The matter is the end stage of the whole compression, of the whole manifestation. So the evolution happens in the energy field. And so in human terms, for us to evolve, whether that is to a higher level or whatever you want to name it or you want to look at it, for us to evolve, we need to experience it. So it first needs to happen before it becomes a reality in matter. So before the DNA actually writes it down and says, oh, things have changed now, yeah? So it's now this hot on Earth, or it's now the forest is gone, it's now a desert where you're living. So now we write that down because it's a fact. It's now established over time, a lot of time. So first the experience, and then the experience as in, the changes in the energetic field. And once they are for real, once they are stabilized, then it starts to trickle down into a physical manifestation. And so also it then trickles down into a genetic code.
Yeah, so this could be a quick one, just to very quickly clear up. So you have the male genetic information and the female that won't be 100% identical, allegedly, we're told.
No.
When they come together and create the double helix, is there a kind of energetic coming together first that will sort out the differences before it manifests?
Well, you have to start thinking about what is coming together and what is it used for. If it 90%, 94% of it is used to create a human form, that is pretty much the same for all human beings. Yes, there are differences between the Chinese and the British. Yes, but they're still complete human beings. They still have livers and they sit in the same place in the body and they do the same function. So the differences over the whole spectrum of what is needed to create that human form are minute. So these two different, indeed, you're quite right, different strains, single strands of DNA can easily fit together because there's only loose bits, if you like, that don't quite fit together. And what happens within that first cell, as it starts to move along, these differences then iron themselves out. As in, there is for certain bits, there will be a superiority of one side over the other, depending on, how strong that quality is in the family line of the male or the family line of the female. So I mean, they basically fit together. It's only the details, the the color of the room, which color do you paint it? That's different, but the rooms are all the same. So you can get on with making your human form. And when you get to the very last bits, then there is a bit, if you want to view it like that, there is a bit of a fight between who are we going to express most. Yeah. But that's minute. So it doesn't interfere with the or it doesn't deny the process from developing.
Yeah, it's a little bit like when you move into a new house and you agree on the house with your wife. The rooms are what they are, and you might have a little bit of a fight over the wall color, but your wife's going to win pretty much most of the time. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got another couple of quick ones. So a lot of people think that just because we've got this amazing potential, we can already manifest it. That we're unlimited spiritual beings. But I've had problems with that. It's like, I think there's a quote in the Bible that says, faith the size of a mustard grain can move mountains. And people use that to say that actually everything is just about belief and no more. And potentially we could evolve to that. I don't know. But like you're saying, for us to evolve, things have to happen in the environment. We have to see them, respond to them, and they have to be real before they upgrade our potential, shall we say. So would you say that at this moment, we have the potential to grow to the incredible beings, but we are limited, and belief isn't going to be enough for most of us to get through the changing of life?
We fail to understand that the belief of a single unit, a single organism within a group of organisms is only a single belief. But where the group is going depends on the belief of the mainstream, if you like. So evolution is built or evolves, comes out of the different beliefs within a group. The belief system needs to change in order for it to be able to manifest. That is correct. But it moves in stages. One individual within a group believes something, right? Which is contrary to what the rest of the group believes. The group will continue to move and manifest whatever the group believes until there are enough people within the group so that the dynamics of the group and the belief system which leads to that dynamics will start to change. That's the second phase. Once the group believes something different, then they will start in the third phase, start to manifest that difference. Right? So it's not because you and I believe something that is different from what the media or the government is telling people and what most people believe. You and I are not going to change the world. The world will change when people, enough people, believe that it should be different or that it is different. Yeah? So an individual can influence his own small area, right? So you can make changes according to your belief system. if you believe that it is very important to live closer to nature, then you can move to a house, to a place, to a group of people that are living closer to nature. You can do that for yourself, but you cannot make the rest of the world do the same thing. You don't have that power as an individual. But when enough of that power comes together, then that will grow. So as an individual, your responsibility towards the whole of life and the evolution of mankind is to express your own belief system as much as you can. Other than that, you can still live your life with your cell phone or whatever it is and still believe that it should be different. So you can, in your talk and the way you behave, you can make that clear to your surroundings. But that's as far as it goes.
Yeah, I think we'll probably even come back to that in later talks, because when we're talking about human health and life balance, you can't, unfortunately, in this world, you can't avoid political. You know, I'm not a political person, but politics is really how a community functions. So we'll probably come back to that in later, because it seems we do live in a collective experience, not there is my individual experience, but it is within the collective.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we'll come back to that. So another last couple of things. So you talk about the genetic information having all the coding to make what is necessary to create all these different cells, whether it's a liver cell, skin, whatever cells you need. So that's to create the physical proteins, fats, whatever. Now I've heard, I don't know if there's anything right in this, but Rupert Sheldrake talks about doesn't know explain the form, as it were. And he talks about an energetic, in the energy field, there's the form of the human being. So you've got the genetic information that's being guided by some kind of energetic form that it's going to shape the human form, shall we say. That's in the energy field. And so the genetic material, the environmental influences, and this field of human form intercommunicate so that the cells know exactly where to go and create bone, create liver, create this. So is there some kind of energetic template of a human being behind the genetic information, or is there actually enough in the genetic information itself?
There is enough in the genetic information itself. And the form that the organism takes, you should never forget, of course, that whatever space that something takes up, that is space that is stolen, if you like, from a bigger space, from the space around it. So there is a pressure information that is continually being exchanged. So in the expression of your physical matter, it's already calculated in the expression itself what form that can take. That goes for the human form as a whole, but don't forget, the human form comes from an animal form. A 2-footer comes from a 4-footer, yeah? An inside skeleton comes from an outside skeleton. So it's modifications of what was already there, and the modifications happen because of the pressure that comes on the development system. And the pressure is, in order to survive, we need to alter this bit. So it now takes on another form. Yeah, we go from 4 stomachs to 2 stomachs to 1 stomach. Why? because of the way we're going to feed ourselves. The requirement for that is different. And so towards the future in evolution, we see that change happening. So the outside form from our liver comes about by as a result of the two forces. The inside force that pushes it out and an outside force of its surrounding materials and its surrounding energies that go, whoa, 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 whoa. Here's no place for you. Oh, yes, you can slip in there. Okay, that's your form now. Yeah. So it isn't a separate thing. It is built into the system itself. So the information is already there, and the outside information confirms that and holds it in check. Yeah. But over time, large periods of time, we will see that the human form evolves as well. Yeah, if you take pictures of the Neanderthaler, they look slightly different to what we are looking, to the way we look. We could say that, you know, people now are taller than they were 100 years ago. So there's always continual change, but it is the balance between the inside force which pushes out and the outside force which pushes in.
So going back to, it seems then, because we hear a lot about, now I have to be careful with this question on YouTube because of censorship, but if we think about, should we say, medical interventions of the last few years, and you have one version of events, other version of events talk about genetic engineering. Now, if anybody is wondering how significant is this in the last 4 years, we wrote a book called Medical Despotism that some of the viewers will know about, and the relevance of that will leave that into there. Yeah. But what I'm talking about is, again, genetic engineering. After the first cell is created, what we're talking about is environmental engineering, because when Huxley wrote his book, The Brave New World, only the first cell was what you would call genetically engineered. After that, it was all about the cell was growing into this human being, but they were controlling completely the environmental impulses. So a lot of people are being afraid at the moment if we're being genetically engineered in certain ways. And yet I asked you this question a while back because I wasn't happy with what I was hearing, and you said basically the nucleus is a closed thing in the center of the cell. It doesn't need to take anything up physical from its environment. It doesn't need to take up any new genetic information from its environment, because as we're discussing now, if it needs a new code, that will come out of the energy field. Yeah. Not out of the exterior environment itself to evolve. No. Because again, as we go back again and repeat, evolution is an energetic process and not a physical process.
Yeah, and the other thing that people may want to consider, if they're really afraid of being genetically engineered, there are roughly 7 trillion cells in your body, right? They all come from the one cell, that first cell. In that first cell, all the genetic information that is required to build you and let you function is in there. So the 7 trillion cells of your body all contain the same DNA information. Yet there are so many different expressions of that DNA, so that you create kidneys and livers and hearts and muscles and so on and so forth. Yeah. So when people talk about or when the medical profession talks about genetic engineering, are they then talking about changing the genetic information that is in every single one of your cells? Then I want to ask them, how do you do that? How do you do that? Yeah, because you can't do it by a physical means. And if I'm wrong about this, I want to hear from whoever says I'm wrong. You know, how can you change that in a physical sense? So you can change the DNA, as you said, through the energy field. But your DNA is the last bit of your human being and the functioning of that human being that will change. Because for the DNA to change, for the DNA to put a different code in, it will have to be there for a long time, and it will have to be a stable thing. So you cannot change the cellular function of the cells of your body through messing about with the DNA. I've already said, if you take the DNA out of the cell, it will still continue to do what it needs to do and what it always has done. But you can change that cell by changing the impulses that go through the cell. So if you create a heavy, a powerful, energetic environment, then the cell function will change. And the best way to create a different and a powerful environment for a human being who harbors that cell is to make him afraid or make him believe something, really truly believe something, whether it's fear or it's hope or it's whatever. Yeah, and if you use physical means, then the effect doesn't come from that physical method that you're using, but it comes from what that method stands for, what it tells you, and what you believe it tells you. So genetic genetic engineering is complete nonsense unless you believe in it.
Yeah. Like I say, the relevance for that would be in our other book, but we'll leave that there. I think it's probably what I'd like to do, but probably not tonight now, because it's another long subject, is when we go after that conception and the influences on the development, probably firstly in the womb. And then in the conference you did for us, that is actually low down on my YouTube channel, you mentioned the first 2 to 3 years, and then up to the 7 years, and then puberty is another era, and then so there's definite clear stages that people have noticed of development, influences on the development, and how a growth can slightly, what we would perceive to be go one way or go another way, and all the different influences and the results of that.
Yeah, but it might be good to finish off with the last few thoughts about this. We've already said the influences, the first 10 to 12 weeks. Yeah, no matter what you do or what mum does on the outside, that development is fixed. You started it, in other words, lightning strikes and the process starts, and it will finish it. Or if it can't finish it, the creation will die off. But first 10 to 12 weeks, fixed development into the human form. Mum's behavior has no influence on that in those weeks. It's pre-programmed, it's going, that's it, right? and the embryo feeds itself from the information and the material that is inside the female egg environment, right? So the connection with the mother is being built during that time, but only becomes functionally superior after that time. So that is where maybe next time then we can start building the entire human being. Now we just got the form, but of course we know that when a baby is born, they're all different. So what happens between making the human form for everybody the same? Minor details. We're not going to mention those. Everybody the same to different babies that are being born. So something there changes, and we can do that next time.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to say to people, we're all learning, and unfortunately, we should be born and educated within this information, but we're not. In an ideal world, you'd probably get yourself in the best mental, physical, emotional, spiritual health probably a year before conception. You'd understand all the influences during development to get the, should we say, the best end product. But we're not educated in this. And when I started learning this, your first instant reaction is, crikey, am I such an idiot? Is that what I've, you look at your strengths and your weaknesses in your child, and you can be proud of the strengths. But when you start to understand it, you feel guilty about the weaknesses. What role did I play in that? Because your children are a creation of the mother and the father and the influences that they put on them. But this isn't about feeling guilty if you've got a child that's slightly, going off on a wrong route. We weren't born with this information. We're trying to get this information out because this particular part of what we're going to be talking about, I think, is possibly the most important part because you're giving the foundation of life. So I think this is the most important information. Nobody should feel guilty about how their children developed. We can only deal with things when we know about them. And so it's not about making people feel a good or a bad parent. Oh, you got this wrong, you got this right. No, this is just how it works. And it would be great to get this information out to help with the improvement of humanity's condition, really. That's kind of the motivation, not to make people feel bad about past choices.
No, that's right. That's right. And I think on that note, we could end this particular session because I think you put your finger on it there.
Yeah. So we'll leave it there tonight, not go too far, and we'll come back from the development of the fetus next week and all them different types of influences, many influences that come on from that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick.
Look forward to it. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.